To all the geeks and nerds out there, today I'd like to talk about fortress mob spawning and a change that is coming to Minecraft at some point in the future. Now this was announced recently, but there's been a little bit of confusion I think, and I want to clear things up to make sure everyone understands what this change means. So stay tuned and let's check it out. What is this change I speak of? Well, it's these places, the fortresses that you find in the Nether. There's going to be some changes to how mobs spawn in these places at some point in the future. Now this was started off by Slice Lime. He put out a post on Reddit, which you can see on the screen. There's also a link in the description if you want to read this for yourself. It covered a couple of things, but one of the things was changing how mobs spawn in different bounding boxes in this fortress. And I've seen a few people talking about it in the community, and I can definitely see there's a little bit of confusion about what this might mean and what exactly this change is. So what I want to do in this video is to go over that and show you how mobs spawn currently in these fortresses and what the change is going to mean. Let's start off with the basics and which mobs this is going to affect in the Nether. Well, these are the fortress mobs. The Wither skeleton is the one you're probably most familiar with. Obviously, we need the Wither skulls for beacons and fighting the Wither. Also, blazes. You get zombified piglins also spawn here. Rarely, you also get skeletons and you get magma cubes. So these are the mobs that are spawn inside these places, inside the fortresses. So how do mobs spawn at the moment? Well, I've got a little setup here to explain. So let's take a look. To help me explain, I have a mod installed that is going to show us the various bounding boxes that are important when we talk about the how mobs spawn here and what the changes are going to be. So let me press my hotkey and you can see this big red box appears. Now this mod is called the Bounding Box Outline Reloaded mod. It's really useful, definitely check it out. There's a link in the description. It doesn't just show bounding boxes of the Nether Fortresses, it shows you bounding boxes of all sorts of structures all over the world, you know, witch huts, that kind of thing, so you can see where they actually are. So super useful, definitely check it out. So what is this box? Well, this box here, this big red box, is the bounding box of the entire fortress. So you can see this fortress is really big and this bounding box is huge. So this, you can just about see the edge over there where it spans to. That will encompass this whole fortress. So that is the first bounding box to consider. This is the large bounding box of the entire fortress. Now I have a platform over here which is outside. This will come in useful later on. This is outside the bounding box. We'll talk more about that in a minute. But inside we have a couple more platforms. We have this one right here, and we have this diamond one over here. So there is a difference between these two. What is it? Well, let's see. Well, in fact, we actually need a third platform. So I've added this one as here as well. This is an emerald one. And these three platforms here are all the same size, but there is some differences about them. So first of all, let's talk about this fortress and how it's made up. So if I press my other hotkey, here we have, again, from the same mod, the same bounding box mod, we can see how this fortress is actually made up. And as you can see, there are lots of smaller boxes here, all plugged together, a bit like a jigsaw, right? So each of these pieces are plugged together, and this is how a fortress is generated. And you can see that all of these boxes are different sizes. So we have this one over here, which is kind of like an end of a walkway. Then we have like a walkway here. We have another walkway next to it. And then over here, we have this one, which is called an intersection. You can see the shape of the building inside is this cross shape, but you can see the bounding box of that piece is actually quite big. It's actually a big square, or a cuboid, should I say. And these are used quite often in fortress farms because they are the biggest. And over here, we've hit the jackpot. We've got two of these next to each other. So if you want to build a Nether fortress farm over here, this is an ideal place to do it. But as you can see here, all of these pieces are different heights, different widths. They're all sorts of different sizes, and they plug together to generate this fortress. So what is the difference between these platforms? Well, over here we have this diamond one that is inside one of these segments, and it's inside the crossroads, inside the intersection. So this one is very important. So we'll come back to that in a minute. That's the diamond one, which is inside a section. We have these two over here. These are inside the big bounding box that we saw earlier, the huge bounding box. These two are inside it, but one is made of nether brick, and one is made of, well, a different block. I've used emerald, but this could be any other block. There's going to be a difference between these two, which we'll see in a minute. And we've also seen this one over here, out the outside. This is outside of the big bounding box, but it is still nether brick, and we'll come on to that in a minute. So that is what we've got in our setup. And yeah, this is how the fortress is made up. So what is the difference? Well, we need to run a test. I've got some command blocks right here to set up. So yeah, let's run it and see the difference. The test is now running. I've sped up the game, and as you can see, there are mobs spawning and disappearing. So what's happening here is whenever a mob spawns, we delete them straight away. But before we do that, if they are with a skeleton, we put a gold block at their feet. So that's representing fortress mobs. So whenever you see a gold block here, that is a fortress mob spawning. And as you can see, there's a difference. So obviously the fortress mobs, they don't spawn outside the fortress. That's to be expected. They don't spawn on top of the emerald blocks. We'll come into that in a minute. But they are spawning inside the fortress section, so on the diamond blocks, and they're also spawning inside the huge bounding box as long as the floor is made of nether brick. So there we go. They are the differences. So let's get back to the world and talk about it. Here we are outside of the fortress, outside of the huge bounding box, and of course it's no surprise there are no fortress mobs outside. That's to be expected, of course, I'm sure. So let's go inside, and what we can do now is we can go to the options for the mod. We go into here and we can turn off the outside, come back in, and now we can see the all of the sections. So here we go. So probably as expected, inside the fortress, inside these segments, inside these smaller red shapes, you can see that we've got plenty of gold blocks all over the place. So lots of fortress mobs spawning inside the fortress. Again, probably no surprise. I guess the interesting thing here is that you can use any block inside these segments. So of course we've got the diamond blocks here. So fortress mobs are definitely spawning inside diamond blocks, but they're also spawning inside here. So basically you can use any block inside these small segments to allow fortress mobs to spawn. So that's why they're spawning on top of this block. So that is not changing. That is how it works now, and that is how it's going to remain working in the future. The change comes over here. So as you can see here, we had some spawns on these blocks here, but none on here. Both of these platforms are inside the big bounding box of the fortress. None have spawned on top of this, and that is because this is not made of nether brick. Fortress mobs currently only spawn on nether brick that are outside of these segments, and this is the change. This platform right here. If we were to run the test again in the future, once the change is made, you wouldn't see any spawns on this block at all. So what does that mean? Well, if you've made a farm already that's inside one of these segments, then no changes. It's all going to work. If you've built my with a skeleton farm, it's not going to have any issues. It's still going to work, so that is all good. But if you've built a wither skeleton farm where you have extended one of these platforms, let's say you've got this platform right here and you've extended it out here with nether brick, that is going to affect your farm because no mobs are going to spawn on that platform anymore. Now that change hasn't been made yet. It's not going to be made in 1.16, but it will be made at some point in the future. Now thanks very much to Slicelum and Mojang for putting out that post. That's really useful post, and it was really well written. Totally makes sense, and it's great that we're getting this kind of heads up so we can think about this stuff before we start making these big farms that we then have to then change later. We're getting a big heads up, so thanks to those guys for that. Really useful, and I hope this video has helped out. And so one thing to reiterate is that mob spawning inside these segments is not going to change. So you don't have to design your farm in like a cross shape, for example here. Mobs will still spawn inside these areas that are not currently part of the structure, as long as you're inside these bounding boxes. So yeah, you don't have to, as I said, dig out kind of the corners here and just have a farm with spawner spaces in a cross. That is not required when this change comes in. You can make your platform 19 by 19 as you normally would inside this intersection, and you are all good. So there we have it. That is how fortress mobs spawn inside a fortress currently, and the change that is coming at some point in the future. We're not sure when, but when it does, I'm sure we will know, and I will let you know if you follow the channel. So I hope you found the video interesting, and I hope it was useful, and if it was, then please hit the like button, and if you're new, then feel free to subscribe, and if you've got any comments or suggestions, then get in that comment section. Alright my geeks, until next time, I will see you later.